All right, I'm just going to take you through some vocabulary relating to imperialism and the types of imperialism real quick. Just to start off with here, our kind of broad definition of imperialism is that one country is controlling the political, economic, or cultural life of another region, typically speaking another country, or what we would think of as a country. And an empire is a group of territories controlled by another country. You can think of like Star Wars or something like that, the evil empire. And these are the five that we're going to talk about: annexation, colonization, protectorate, sphere of influence, and military/economic aid. And they're listed here from the most controlling to the least controlling. So let's start off with annexation. Annexation is very simply just taking over your neighbor. If you can imagine the United States attacking Canada and then getting rid of the Canadian government and making Canada part of the United States, and all the people that are Canadian now being U.S. citizens. This actually did happen in history when the United States was expanding westward. The United States attacked Mexico and annexed Texas, and pretty much everything between Texas and California. Here's a map of what Texas looked like at the time. Texas had kind of declared independence. The story's a little bit more complicated. You'll hear more about it in your U.S. history class. Um, Another example, the USSR tried to annex Afghanistan in the 1980s. There's a map of the USSR. Afghanistan is kind of like right here. You can see that. Anyhow, on we go to colonization. So colonization is pretty much the same thing as annexation, except it's not your next door neighbor country. It would be someplace further away. So setting up a government in a far off land where you would rule the area for your own benefit, you being the imperialist here. Some examples, France was a country that used direct colonial rule, meaning that the French went to all these places in Africa. You can see that France is here in blue, and then especially in northern and kind of a little bit of the sub-Saharan region of Africa, France set up these colonies, and what they would do was just have French people come and rule them, and tell the local Africans or people from Madagascar or people from Southeast Asia over here what they were supposed to be doing. India was also a British colony, although India didn't use the direct form of colonial rule as much as, say, France did. The Philippines was an American colony for about 50 years from the beginning of the 1900s, from the Spanish-American War, 1896, all the way up to after World War II. Next up is protectorate. So a protectorate's a little bit more complicated. It's kind of imagine a relationship with a bully. So where local rulers are allowed to stay in power, but they have to take orders from the imperial country. You might also call this a satellite state, a mandate, or a puppet state. If you can imagine like playing with a sock puppet, it's kind of like that. It's also, I mentioned a bully earlier, threatening. So say, oh, we're Britain and we have this big advanced army and you better do what we tell you to do. Otherwise, we're going to unleash our army on you, local ruler. So it ends up having the same effect, essentially, as a colony. Some other examples, this is what the British did in Africa. You can see the British Empire here from the kind of northern part of Africa all the way across the continent down towards the southern part of Africa. And this is the form of colonial rule where there's African people living there, but the British intimidated the African rulers into doing what the British wanted them to do, for the most part. There's some other examples there. Cuba, the USSR, there's a map of the USSR and the satellite states. These are kind of little countries next to the USSR that were intimidated by that imperial power. Two more. Second to last one here is sphere of influence. Sphere of influence and the last one, economic and military aid, are both more to do with economics than actually physically controlling people. So sphere of influence is something that we typically think of in imperialism with China. China was not a place that the Western imperial powers plus Japan were able to actually conquer and rule in the same way that we think of a colony or a protectorate. China was a country that was fairly well united. They had a government that kind of kept a lot of those Chinese people together, And we're talking, instead of tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people, we're talking like tens of millions of people in China that were more united. So it made China a much tougher task to conquer for the Western imperialists. And China had a very, very established national government. So what the Western imperialists ended up doing was, in essence, kind of fighting with each other over trading rights in China and trying to establish these spheres of influence. And if you can pause and take a look at this map, and you can see that this is all China here, and the different colors down here on the bottom correspond to different areas that the Western imperialist powers claimed. Like Japan claimed these purple areas as areas of exclusive trading. Japan also had taken over Korea. Russia up here kind of would make sense, I suppose, and then France down here in the south, and Britain along this important river going through the middle of China, as well as the part of China in here next to the British colony of India. Lastly, oh, sorry, there's a little political cartoon there. You can see the caricature of the Chinese guy looking very surprised in the background, while all of the characters of these different, there's the Russian dude and over here, and then the German guy here. This looks like the British one. Maybe this woman is America or something like that. And there's Japan. Anyhow, they're all got their knives and they're carving up the China pie. Lastly, we're going to talk about economic or military aid. So economic and military aid is, just like it sounds, giving money or giving soldiers and guns and stuff training to a country. How is that imperialism, or how is that bad, you might be wondering? Well, it's kind of like a I scratch your back, you scratch my back kind of thing, wherein I'm giving you guns and I'm giving you money, and then you kind of get used to having those guns and money, and if I can always threaten to like stop giving you guns and money, and that would kind of change the power dynamic in that country. Essentially, it's kind of I'm paying up front for certain favors down the road, perhaps, or your support in some kind of way against another country. So the economic military aid is actually something that we see a lot more now. So it's not cool anymore for a powerful country like the United States to just go out and conquer somewhere else in the world. But the type of imperialism the United States does engage in is more along the lines of economic and military aid, using the spending power and economic clout of the United States to intimidate in the way that England or France or the United States, even back in the day, would have used their military to intimidate and to get other countries to do what they want them to do. So those are 5 different types of imperialism, and you can see this kind of little cartoon pop up there and some examples down here. Thank you.